I see so many chess players lose their games because they make way too many pawn moves. And in this video, I will be teaching you a new strategy you can use, in which we will really be limiting the pawn moves we make to basically only using the E pawn, the D pawn, and the C pawn. The other ones, the ones that I am coloring in blue here, I would like to just not use those for as long as possible. Because pawn moves always create potential weaknesses, except for the E, D, and C pawns, which are very important as they help to open up diagonals, they help to open up files, and they help us to get pieces into the game. All right. The opening that I will play here will be something incredibly simple. I am literally just putting a pawn in the center, developing my kingside pieces, and I want to castle as quickly as I can. You could of course also start with the D pawn. That's what I would usually do, but this video I want to show you can also start with the E pawn. All right. They attack our central pawn, so we are just going to help defend this central pawn. All right, and now we have this position. And there is actually a very simple middle game plan that you can follow no matter what opening you play as white. Because the middle game strategy is just to see which pawn that I start with, E4, how can I get my other pawn to the center as well? How can I get this pawn to D4? And if we started with D4, our middle game strategy would just be, how can I get the pawn to E4? So I basically just want to get both pawns into the center. But this will require a lot of preparation. We cannot just push it to the center because, well, they have 3 attackers onto this pawn. We only have 2 defenders onto that pawn. And also this pawn on E4 would just be lost as well. So basically we have to start preparing this. And that is what we are going to do in the middle game. So C3 is a good example of this. I am using my C pawn to help support this central push, to help support pawn to D4. So now the question becomes, can I play this? Can I play D4? Well, let's see. Take. That looks good. We can play this. They might need to move the bishop. And then yes, we have to watch out we don't lose this one, but we basically already achieved our goal. We already got both pawns to the center. So this is actually something we can play. You have to be very careful. Whenever you move this pawn to D4, you are potentially removing the defender from E4. And it's also the other way around. If you push this one to E4, you might be removing a defender from D4. So watch out that either it comes with a tempo, meaning attacking the bishop, so they need to react to that, or you already defend this beforehand, for example, by playing rook to E1. They attack our bishop. That's definitely a high priority problem that we need to solve. So I'm going to just move my bishop back. Okay. I see that they decided not to take, which is okay. Basically, now we have 2 attackers onto this pawn, and there is only really 1 defender of that pawn. So we can technically win this pawn. On the other hand, they could also try to win this pawn. So this is exactly what I'm going to do. I am going to win the pawn. They might win the pawn, but this is okay for us because we actually end up with 2 pawns here, 1 in the center, 1 protecting the center, and my opponent, they have no pawns anymore in the center. All of their central pawns were eliminated. All right. Whenever your opponent gets a piece on your side of the board, meaning on the first 4 ranks, I always try to see if there is a way that I can get rid of it as quickly as possible, because if I don't, then that piece might become a problem in the future. So I think bishop to D5 looks like a very good move there. It attacks that knight, and also it actually threatens this knight, which means that we could take, and we could take, and it actually wins as a pawn. So just like this, we have won a pawn, and we have also eliminated the 2 most important pawns from the opponent. So this game is actually a beautiful example of the play style that I'm trying to teach you, which is that we have the most simple pawn structure. We ended up with 2 pawn islands. We have this pawn island on the right, those 3 red pawns, they are connected. And then we have these 4 pawns on the left, this blue pawn island. Good. 2 very nice pawn islands. We only used the E pawn, D pawn, and C pawn so far. My opponent, I don't know what happened there, but they lost their central pawns. They suddenly have all of these pawns here that have been pushed on on the queen side without really any purpose in this position, and they are already behind the pawn because of the moves that they made. So that's not looking too good for them. Of course, as a single pawn enough to win us the game, while we will still need to continue. We will still need to fight and try to win this game. So that's the next part of this video. All right. Now I am going to teach you many very important things about middle game in general. So the first thing that I always like to ask myself at any middle game is this a more open or a more closed position? Well, that's a good question. To see if it's an open or closed position, we basically need to look at this, at the small center and the big center. I like asking myself, are there many pawns in this center? Because the more pawns, the more closed a position is. So an open position is a position without many pawns, because without pawns, the diagonals and the files are open. All right. Well, there are only 2 pawns here, and they are also my pawns. So this is a very open position. In an open position, the bishop is way more valuable than the knight. So playing bishop takes here would be a strategic mistake, as we would be giving up a bishop for a knight in an open position. Or not doing anything with this bishop and like maybe defending it with a queen, like this, yeah, would also be a strategic mistake, because we would be losing a bishop for a knight. So let's just move the bishop. Yes, it is worth moving the bishop, even if that costs us a full move, just to keep the bishop on the board. All right. Now they are trying to develop, they are trying to attack, but this is okay. We can exchange. This is an equal exchange. It's a light squared bishop for a light squared bishop. So that is okay. The ending position is still balanced. We still both have a dark squared bishop, and we still both have a knight, and we still have the extra pawn. All right. It is important for us to get the final pieces into the game. I always like to go knights and bishops first. That knight was not yet in the game, so this is already a better square for it. It's helping with e4. I actually wanted to potentially go to e4, but they made that impossible with the rook. Okay, now that we have the knights and the bishops in the game, that's usually time to start thinking about the queen and the rooks. There is actually something interesting going on here. We have this long light squared diagonal, but the light squared bishop is gone, but their rook is there. So if we play the move queen to f3, that is a move that optimizes the queen, and it also puts some tension on this diagonal, because now that knight is effectively pinned. Meaning if they move that knight, if that knight moves, the rook is gone. And since there is one square in between the knight and the rook, that means the knight can never move somewhere and protect the rook. If there were 2 squares in between and the rook was in the corner, the knight would be able to go somewhere and also protect the rook. So these are the best pins you can have, if there's like 1 square in between the knight and the other piece. Okay, my opponent now plays pawn to e5. So what they are proposing here is a simple exchange of pawns. They are trying to use a flank pawn to exchange our central pawn. Is this a trade that we should make? Well, very important. If I don't do anything, if I play this, which would be a horrible move, this is what I'm sure many people would have already played earlier in the game. If I play this, they would take in the center, I would take, and I would already lose a pawn. So that's not good. That's not what we want. And if I, let's say, protect it with my knight, I could always end up with this, which would be a position where now we have an isolated pawn. We basically ruin their pawn structure. We still have this island, but this one is isolated. It's all by itself. And an isolated pawn is usually going to be lost at some point. So that is also not what we want. So we don't want to isolate our pawn, which basically I come to the conclusion. So basically I come to the conclusion that I just wanted to take this pawn, because if we take that pawn, then we fix the problem of getting an isolated pawn. They could honestly have taken back. I mean, the position is not great for them, but I think they could have really taken back, and that would not be the biggest of problems. They are losing, I think, in every variation since we are already up a pawn, but they go here. That's perfectly fine. Basically means we just have one extra pawn here. Okay. Now what do I want to do? Well, I want to get my rooks into the game. We also have to watch out. There is a possible trade going on here, but it is still an equal trade. It's a bishop for bishop trade, and I can always capture back with my queen, which means I can keep my pawn structure intact. I never like it if I have something like this. This knight is literally just hanging, meaning it is completely unprotected. That means that if they move this knight, there could be a problem. At the same time, this pawn is also hanging. So a lot of things are hanging at the same time, basically means unprotected. How can we fix this? Well, knight e4 removes the knight from the square where it's just unprotected. It also protects the pawn. It is protected by the queen. And if they now take this, I can capture that back with the knight as well. So knight e4 is a very good move. I think it just fixes all of our problems. Can we take this with a pawn? 100%. Will I take that with a pawn? No. Will I take that with my queen? Definitely no, because if we take with the queen, we lose the knight. So I'm going to take it with my knight, because I really like to keep my pawn structure intact as much as I possibly can. They are basically trying to win back the pawn here later in the game, which is why I think that they did not just capture it immediately, because that's basically an option that's available to them later. b4 doesn't help solve the problem that much, although I actually think I was going to say b4 might actually lead to knight takes c3, but of course that's not possible because the queen is here. So actually I think b4 might help us. I think b4 was just going to help us. But it's one of those pawns, as I said in the beginning, I usually don't use these pawns. That's why I was hesitating for a moment about pushing this. But at this moment, pushing b4 actually helps to save material. That's the first thing. And also, I have to say, we are already getting into the endgame. The endgame meaning most pieces have been removed from the board already. So in the endgame, it does make sense that we will need to start moving more pawns. We also have a pawn majority over here. We have 4 pawns versus 2 pawns. And we actually also already have a passed pawn, a pawn that can be pushed to promotion. So all of this is really great, honestly. What I am looking for now, since we are up 2 pawns and since we also have the passed pawn, is I am just looking for trades. If I can trade as many pieces as possible, that would be amazing, because every single trade brings us one step closer to just having a simple endgame where I can push this pawn. So, for example, rook here, I think that makes sense, adding some pressure to the knight, basically potentially winning that knight if they did not protect it. And I would also like to double up my rooks if I can, so maybe rook d4, and I'm also looking into rook to d1. We have to be careful, because if you use this strategy, if you think about limiting your pawn moves as much as possible, there is always the potential of getting a back rank checkmate, when they give you a check and then suddenly you end up being checkmated on the back rank. Here that is not the case, because we still have the move knight to f1. To prevent this back rank checkmate, some people like to create, I think this is called a luft for the king, where basically it has a square it can go to by pushing a pawn. This is something that I would only do later into the game, basically late into the end game. And honestly, my experience is that you should only do this when it's really necessary. So this, could we play it? Yes. Would I play it? No, I would actually continue with the plan, because I calculated that there is no back rank mate. There is no problem there that we need to solve. So it's basically okay. All right. And now I think we are just going to have a massive trade-off. We can take this. All right. They go for this check. We already expected that. They go for the other check. That's fine. We block with the knight. And then they take here. But this is amazing for us, because we basically traded almost everything, and we can even return the favor and give them a back rank check as well. And yes, 100% I'm going to trade those rooks. Okay, now we have basically what I have wanted for all this time, a very, very simple endgame. We both have a knight, but we have 4 pawns versus 2 pawns on this side of the board, which means that yes, I can start thinking about pushing those pawns. So that's the plan. Basically, the new strategy here becomes the PPP strategy. Push past pawn. We want to push past pawn. We want to push this pawn as much as possible and promote, But of course, we cannot just push the pawn. We will need to get some more pieces over there. Getting the king over there is very important in the endgame. Getting your knight involved is also important. That's why I moved the knight over there. Okay, they are trying to make it harder for me to enter with the king. I think we can start with a check. Okay, king can go to e4. I'm just looking how can I get my king as close as possible. If he is very close by with his king and his knight as well, he might put up some defense, but we can always just switch and start attacking the other side of the board. This part of the game can be a lot of maneuvering. Trading knights would always be amazing for us. And also advancing with the king. Moving the king forward, making progress with the king is also great. Because this particular position here, black is completely lost. They are using these two pieces to stop this pawn, but my king just wants to go over there. And they didn't really have any other choice. If they went here, there was even knight c6 with a check. So very good position for us. Let's just take. And now I think we are just going to win this more easily, because now we can even switch plans and go to the other side. Oh wait, I wanted to actually defend this, but yeah, it's with a check. Okay, that means they will be able to pick up that pawn, and I will be able to pick up this pawn. In these endgames, if I can save a pawn from being captured by the knight, I will save a pawn from being captured by the knight. So you will sometimes see me make like pawn moves here, but it's just, if I don't need to lose the pawn, I won't lose the pawn. There's no point in just giving them more pawns than necessary. All right. Now this should be a very, very easy endgame, because basically we have 3 extra pawns. And if we have 3 extra pawns, it's really all about that PPP strategy. I am going to continue just a little bit more, because I'm sure some people here would still struggle. But basically, we just need to think about pushing the pawn. The outside passed pawn is the best one to push. The outside passed pawn, the one that's furthest away from everything that's happening. So you can see me just push, 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 ignoring everything, even giving away some pawns at this point, because I want to push. Of course, we cannot push here, so we need to attack the knight. Try to get the knight to move. And if they protect, if they stop this passed pawn, well, it's a very good thing that we have a second passed pawn that we can start moving over there as well. And basically, they will be in trouble. I think king g7 is nice. All right. Yeah, and that's just game over for them. We can just take. Even if they didn't, we would be winning. All right, then you can make a queen, and then this should be an easy checkmate. So please try to use this strategy in your next game, and drop a comment to let me know how it went.